Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio this morning. I'd like to thank our guests for returning. You're a regular pro now. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Frank. Appreciate it.
Of course, it's election season.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Last time we talked, I wasn't even worried about that. I think we were more focused on sludge, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But how's the campaign going?
It's going good. So I just want to let everyone to know to go out and vote November 7th. There's also early voting going on at the Annex Building in Bath. I think also here at the Corning Library. I am running unopposed for Town Supervisor, Thurston Town Supervisor, for a 2-year term. But, still want everyone to come out, just show your support, cast a vote. We also have Dan G., who was appointed to the Thurston Town Board in March. He's running for a 4-year term. And then also, this is important, we also have Jen Hargrave. She was appointed in April, and she wasn't able to get on the ballot. So everyone, Thurston voters, had to write her in.
It's not difficult. It's just confusing, I suppose.
It's a little confusing because you have to write her in at the bottom of the town council column. You'll write in Jen Hargrave or Jennifer Hargrave, either or, and just make sure you get her inside the box. You write her name right in there, and
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always difficult for people to kind of get it first. But yes, I worked with Jen, so I'll endorse Jen.
I fully endorse both of them. It's been great to have them board. Yep.
Great. So last time you were on, we were talking about sludge, and for those, I'm sure it seems like the community. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the community does seem very well aware of what's going on with that.
Yes, the community, the Thurston community is well aware of what is happening.
How did the meetings go? I know you had forums, which I appreciate that you were so open in the public about this. This wasn't just closed, not closed meetings, but public meetings that no one attended. This sounded like a lot of people were talking about it.
Right. So we've tried to make this process transparent. In February, we passed a 1-year moratorium to halt the expansions of any land spreading in Thurston or any new permits. We held a hearing at the Campbell Savona High School back in August, tried to gauge support from the public about what they wanted us to do. We had, 3 DEC officials at that meeting, the director of Region 8, Tim Walsh, along with two deputy commissioners that Governor Hochul had sent to speak. And then we had, public hearing at the end of August, and then September, and then we did have something, another public hearing prior to our final vote on local law number 3 of 2023, sewage sludge disposal law of the town of Thurston. And we did pass that in final form on on October 18th.
And where does it go from here? Because I know this isn't cut and dry with things like this.
It isn't cut and dry. There is will be challenged. It's currently being challenged by Agna Markets. Casella is challenging it. They're stating it infringes on the right to farm, but we, the Thurston Town Board, we feel that there is a public health crisis in Thurston. Water testing, uncertified as well as certified testing conducted since March of this year have shown contamination, PFAS contamination in the groundwater of landowners adjacent to the land spreading sites, in some cases 10 times above the EPA limit, which is 4 parts per trillion. And of course, the PFAS compounds are these forever chemicals that are being, they're man-made chemicals, and they're being linked to several negative health effects like cancers, in particular. Yeah.
So when I say the next steps, I know that you are urging others to get involved as well.
We are urging others to get involved. For instance, the town of Cameron passed a 1-year moratorium a couple months after we did, kind of urging Cameron as well to pass a local law. I also would urge the Steuben County Legislature to get involved. The Steuben County could pass a county-wide ban
Okay.
on the disposal of sewage sludge throughout the county. Now, towns have the ultimate say on land use issues, so towns could opt out of that if they didn't want to participate for whatever reason. But at a minimum, I would also urge the county to amend their 2018 solid waste management plan and remove language in which they call biosolids beneficial, a beneficial additive to the land. Biosolids is the term that DEC uses to refer to the sewage sludge.
And do you think that this, depending on what happens with you in Thurston, is this going to be something that other towns, that aren't in Thurston, people that aren't in Thurston, should be made aware of, that this could be coming to their area?
I think it definitely should be. It needs to be made aware. Actually, there is, so the issue here in Thurston is, Casella wants to bring sewage sludge from the Bay Park Wastewater Treatment Facility, Long Island, Nassau County, just east of JFK Airport. This is one of the largest wastewater treatment facilities in the state, and they are currently in the process of expanding it. And sewage sludge is known to be contaminated with PFAS compounds. And actually, there's a ballot initiative. The state, they are making it easier actually for towns and cities, villages to create wastewater treatment facilities. So, yeah, this could be coming near to a town near you.
So to speak. Exactly. What are the options for sludge? I mean, I know you don't want to just say no to everything. You want to give other options, right? Is there something that can be done with it?
I think, first of all, there needs to be testing done on it. Mm-hmm. We've requested from DEC testing data from the sewage sludge coming out of Bay Park since April, and nothing. If they want to land apply it, it does have beneficial things like phosphorus and nitrogen in it for plants, but there's a cocktail of other chemicals in there.
Sure.
So if there's a way to remove those chemicals, possibly it could be land applied. But I think in the interim, it just needs to be simply dried and then just landfilled.
Sure. So let's move away from sludge for a moment, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because I know you are running for election unopposed, which is always nice, right? But tell us about some other things that you're seeing in Thurston. Maybe some of your goals for the next 2 years, or maybe some things you want to see changed.
It's going forward. In Thurston, I think the community's kind of been united around the sludge issue, but I would like to see a united community just in general.
Of course.
I think any government, particularly local government, they should be providing services to individuals, and in some ways I think that's been lacking in Thurston in recent years. So our main thing that we're focusing on outside of sludge is our ARPA funds, which we received 2 payments during COVID of $65,000 each. We need to get those appropriated at least in 2024. So the thought is we're next year playground, some type of park at the town hall. We've also, back in July, we applied for a block grant. It's a 25% of Thurston live below or at the poverty level. So this block grant will, if we get approved, we'll figure out this in the fall. If we're approved, it will allow Thurston residents to make improvements at no cost to their stick-built homes. So working on that. Been working a little bit with the fire district, the fire department, helping them. They're applying for a FEMA grant to get some funding to upgrade some of their equipment. We're also, with our ARPA funds, working on putting in a kitchenette at the town hall. I really would like to see, playground, the kitchenette, and I'd like to see the town hall become more of a community building.
Sure.
Somewhere where the community can
community center, kind of.
Yeah, kind of a center.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So just before we go, what would you say to the voters before they head to the booth November 7th? I keep reiterating that. November 7th, go out and vote. What would you say?
I think, we've done a lot of great things. I became town supervisor March 1st. It kind of makes me tired thinking about some of the,
That's a lot of meetings.
The meetings and the things. But I just want to continue forward. I mean, I think we are making progress, and I want to continue forward with that progress. And it's essential that myself, Dan, and Jen, as well as our other great board members, Noel Sylvester, Deputy Town Supervisor Holly Chase, that we have this, this team in place to continue moving forward.
Now, I forgot that you've just been there since March 1st. Has there? And then I'm throwing you a bonus question here.
Okay.
Has there been anything that has surprised you?
I think it was really overwhelming taking it over March 1st, but really, I would just say it's been everyone's been very supportive and helpful, and I can't say enough about that. So that's probably been the biggest surprise.
It's a nice surprise. A nice surprise.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thanks so much for being on the program this morning.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Good luck, November 7th.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us.
Yeah.
And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thank you again to our guest, Michael Volino. He is running for Thurston Town Supervisor, and he is currently such. So we appreciate him being on the show. It is election season, so we are busy. We've got guests every day, obviously up until Election Day. Tomorrow, former Congressman Joe Sempolinski and current chairman of the Steuben County GOP. He's going to be joining us. I know people really enjoy our conversations, so I hope that you'll tune in tomorrow. Oh, I wanted to show you something. So just before we get into the nitty-gritty, I had mentioned yesterday when Mayor Boland was on the program, we started talking about Halloween here on Marcus Street. And for those of you who have not been, I think maybe it might have sounded like we were overhyping the crowd and maybe talking about maybe using bigger terms than we needed to about how the numbers. But what I did here is, bear with me. So this is what obviously Corning looks like right now at 7:14 in the morning. Okay, this, if I can do it, this is what it looked like yesterday on the street in the thick of things. I don't know if you can see it there with all the throngs of people walking down Marcus Street. We went through a lot of candy yesterday and saw a lot of great costumes. So thanks for everybody who stopped by, said hi, said they watched the show. I really appreciate it. Okay, now we unfortunately have to get into really troubling news of the day. The FBI saying that terrorism threat to the United States has hit a whole other level after the Hamas attack on October 7th. Terrorist threats against the U.S. reached a whole other level, that's the exact quote, after the Hamas attack on Israel, said FBI Director Christopher Wray. This was at a hearing in front of Congress yesterday. The reality is that the terrorism threat has been elevated throughout 2023, but the ongoing war in the Middle East has raised the threat of attack on Americans to a whole other level. And I don't bring this up to be, obviously, doom and gloom or to scare you, but it's something that we have to be mindful of. Way back a few years ago, people started talking about we can't have that September 10th mentality, where everything's going to be fine. We have to be vigilant, and I think that's what's being said here. Now, Ray suggested that Al-Qaeda has issued its not suggested, that was the wrong word. He said that Al-Qaeda has issued its most specific call for attacks on the United States in years. Islamic State leaders have ordered followers to attack Jewish communities, and Hezbollah is eyeing U.S. targets in the Middle East. And we are going to talk about this threat on the Jewish community and this rise in anti-Semitism that unfortunately we've been discussing on this program now since October 7th, and it is troubling. It's reared its ugly head, and I think some people have been surprised by how many various avenues it is appearing from, this anti-Semitism. But I also found it was interesting, before we move on from this exact terrorism threat, FBI Director Christopher Wray, he went silent when asked by, who was it, Josh Hawley? Is that who asked him? No, excuse me, Senator Rick Scott. said, "Is the United States safer from foreign terror threats today? Are we safer than when Joe Biden took office, from the day he took office?" That was the question by Senator Rick Scott. It took a weird kind of turn if you've watched it. Ray took an extended pause, sitting silently and appearing to be in deep thought before finally answering, quote, "What I would say to you is that the terror threats have elevated, but I also think there are a lot of things the country has done throughout law enforcement to be better prepared to deal with them." So taking to Twitter, Scott wrote, "I asked FBI Director Ray a simple question. Is the U.S. safer today than it was before Joe Biden took office?" After nearly 10 seconds of silence, he finally admitted what we all know. The terror threats have elevated. And I've got to say, one of the things that I think many people have talked about, including us here on the program, what scares us is the open borders. And, we've had the numbers for you before, how many people were caught at the border trying to enter that were from these countries that pose a threat. How many people weren't caught? How many people snuck through? And that's why when you start to see headlines that say terrorism threat hits a whole other level, it raises those concerns, and it's something that you have to be very mindful of, and something that I think you should be made aware of. And that's why we bring it up here on the program. So we're going to talk more about this. We're going to talk about the rise in anti-Semitism when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. A beautiful morning on Market Street. A cold morning. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Haga. So, a headline coming from Reuters. Open hatred of Jews surges globally, inflamed by the Gaza war. Anthony Alder, speaking outside a synagogue he has attended for prayer in a London neighborhood, said, quote, "This is the scariest time to be Jewish since World War II. We have had problems before, but things have never been this bad in my lifetime. The biggest fear is that there will be a random attack on our community, on our families, and our children." And if you start to look at the numbers, again, coming from Reuters, and take it with a grain of salt, meaning that not all the numbers are in these various countries. But in the United States, Jewish advocacy group, the Anti-Defamation League, reported last week that anti-Semitic incidents had risen by about 400% in 2 weeks following the October 7th attack. And they go through various countries. I'm not going to go through all of them, but in Canada, they're announcing a scary rise in anti-Semitism. This is coming from Reuters, by the way, if you want to find the numbers for yourself. In London, the police force said that there's been a 14-fold increase in incidents of anti-Semitism since October 7th. France, there's been 819 anti-Semitic acts since October 7th. That compares with a figure of 436 for the whole year of 2022. Germany, a survey by Civil Society Observatory, the RIAS, said that weird, found a 240% year-on-year increase in anti-Semitic incidents. Wow. And then you have, well, and I know I mentioned the United States, but here in the United States, even close, we're going to talk about Cornell in just a moment. I've got to take another short break. But it's troubling stories like this coming from Syracuse. Safety concerns have prompted the cancellation of Middle Eastern Studies discussions at Syracuse University. Based on the assessment, Syracuse University is not able to confidently ensure the safety of the speaker or the attendees and has made the decision to postpone the event and reschedule it at a later time. We're going to take a short break. We've got more on this. I'm going to give you an update on what we're learning out of Cornell University right down the road and the rise of anti-Semitism there. When we come back, stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. So what we learned yesterday out of Cornell University, let me put up on the screen for you. Patrick Day, D-A-I, a 21-year-old engineering student, has been arrested in the horrendous anti-Jewish death threats at Cornell University. He's expected to be at court today. He's a junior majoring in engineering at the prestigious university. He was named in a federal complaint charging him with posting threats to kill or injure another using interstate communications, which could land him in jail for up to 5 years. Day is from Pittsford, New York, originally. He was charged just hours after New York State Police troopers identified a person of interest over the threats. I guess what I had read earlier is that he admitted to making these threats. Now, when announcing this, Governor Hochul, I thought, made, unfortunately, a telling statement, and it's something we've known for a long time, but she said the problem didn't begin with the weeks following October 7th attacks. It's been growing on a number of campuses and seen most acutely in the City University of New York. Yes, this has been, that's why yesterday we had that article where, I can't remember who wrote it. It might have actually been the New York Post editorial board saying, you know, these professors that are now speaking out, many of them who have been actually pushing this narrative, now speaking out because they've seen this huge rise in anti-Semitism. And when they speak out, it's too little and way, way too late. And that was a statement that was made yesterday on New York Post. So Patrick Day, his parents are saying that he suffers from severe depression and that his mother was worried he was on the brink of suicide just moments before his arrest. Investigators traced his deranged posts to an off-campus apartment where he allegedly admitted to being the culprit. That's coming from NBC News. His father said, "My son is in severe depression. He cannot control his emotion well due to the depression. No, I don't think he committed the crime." His father asked not to be named. It's not a good sign. We're just relieved because I can't read many of the messages to you on the program that he had posted. Let me just say they're all sickening, and it's glad. And hopefully, you know, and we've heard the statement, anti-Semitism will not be tolerated on this campus. And whether it's Cornell, whether it's Columbia, there's so many, unfortunately, so many examples of it on college campuses. Well, put your money where your mouth is on it will not be tolerated. In this instance, of course, it's going to the police. But I'm curious when you see these protests get out of hand, and I don't know if out of hand is the right word. I think they were, many of them intended to get violent. Will those students be reprimanded? I know Department of Homeland Security Chief Mayorakis has said that he will not, he would not commit, when Josh Hawley asked him, he would not commit to deporting pro-Hamas foreign students from the United States. So again, when you hear from the White House, you hear from politicians, you hear from college deans and presidents saying this anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. Well, show us then. But in this case, Hawley asked, "My question is to you. Should students who are here on a visa, who gather and chant and advocate for the elimination of Israel and attacks on Jewish individuals, whether in the Middle East or here in the United States, which we're seeing on college campuses, should those students have their visas revoked?" Mayorkas said, "I believe you are referencing a provision in the Immigration and Nationality Act about which you have written to me, and I'm very familiar with your assertion that the statutory provision requires the revocation of their visa." So Hawley said, so should they have their visas revoked? I'm asking you. He said, "We are assessing your legal assertion. It is a matter of legal interpretation of the statute." So Hawley doubled down. I hate doing the back and forth, but I think this one's important. He said, "Well, just as a moral matter, should students who are here, foreigners who are here in this country, accessing our university system and advocating for the killing of Jews, Should they be allowed to stay here at our leisure? And Mayorkas said, Senator, it is a matter of law, and it requires a legal interpretation, and I'm not in a position to provide that legal interpretation. And that's when Hawley said, my time is very limited. I think your answer is disappointing. We've got to take another short break. We're going to talk a little bit more about the college campuses, and then we do have other issues I want to bring up coming up here in just a little bit. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House, is having the standalone Israel funding bill, and it's got a lot of people right out the gate in the media that are not predisposed to liking Mike Johnson as a Republican, going after him. Stephen Collinson goes through many, many cliches in his piece titled, Mike Johnson Tests His Power, His New Power, with Risky Gambit on Israel. The Republican majority's rookie leader is painting deep red conservative lines on the blank page of his career in top-level politics, staking out a risky showdown with Democrats and even Senate Republicans over Israel funding that could either build his power base or fracture his authority from the start. Johnson's tactics suggest that he is either likely to be as much of a hostage to hard-right conservatives as his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, or that as one of them himself, what a way to word that, meaning a hard-right conservative, he is resolved to use his tenure, to get ready for it, to stoke fresh chaos in confrontation. So there you go. If you got your bingo card out, we've got one chaos this morning. His decision to seek huge cuts to the IRS funding to pay for a $14 billion emergency aid package to Israel shows that even an ally fighting an existential war is not immune from the stunt politics of a House GOP that spends more time pleasing conservative media than running around the country. Can I ask a quick question on that? Because I know this comes up a lot with Stephen Collinson and CNN in general. What is, I guess it's just got to be Fox, what is this conservative media that they are trying to please? Because as far as I'm aware, that's really the only outlet that you could deem conservative. And I think most people would say, especially with the news programming, that it's fair and balanced, to use the term. So to say that they're going around spending more time trying to please conservative media than actually running the country. I mean, last time I checked, the media was pretty well known for being liberally biased, but maybe something's changed that I missed. His refusal to accept President Joe Biden's request to tie together aid to Israel and Ukraine also set up a confrontation with Mitch McConnell, raising the prospect of a new round of Republican-on-Republican tension following 3 weeks of internal feuding over the speakership. That's enough of Stephen Collinson. A lot of cliches there. Getting paid a lot of money for an article I think probably you and I could have written ourselves. But the White House has signaled that they will veto that standalone Israel funding bill. The White House on Tuesday slammed a standalone Israel funding bill proposed by House Republicans as, quote, bad for Israel and U.S. national security, asserting that President Biden would veto the legislation. Quote, the bill is bad for Israel, for the Middle East region, and for our national security, the Office of Management and Budget said in a scathing statement. The $14.3 billion bill would decouple aid for Israel from the 80-year-old president's broader emergency funding request that includes billions for Ukraine. The spending measure would also strip humanitarian aid for Palestinian civilians from Biden's $106 billion request and would be paid for in part by cuts to IRS. And that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, that increase with the IRS funding. So there you are. Threatening a veto. I don't know how a standalone funding bill for Israel hurts Israel or the Middle East or our national security. Does cutting some money from the IRS hurt our national security? I don't know. There's a lot of questions there, but there is such a push to combine, obviously, the funding for Ukraine and the funding for Israel from they don't want it to be a standalone. They want it to be, obviously, the one bill. Why that is, I'm not exactly sure why that would be a threat for Israel, but I imagine that will be the talking point moving forward. When we come back, there's an amazing piece by Michael Goodwin that I want to get to, and it's called "For the Sake of America, Israel and the World, Don't Go Wobbly," Joe. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. We are back, Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thanks so much for joining us. So Michael Goodwin has a piece of the New York Post this morning. He said, "For the sake of America, Israel, and the world, don't go wobbly, Joe." And he says, within days of the Hamas slaughter of innocent Israelis, President Biden issued a veiled warning to Iran and others who may get involved. As the president put it in an appearance at the White House on October 10th, quote, "To anyone thinking of taking advantage of the situation, I have one word: don't." Now, Michael Goodwin says this is hardly a Clint Eastwood moment, but the point was clear. The United States has Israel's back, so the axis of evil better stay away and stay on the sidelines. Unfortunately, a mere 3 weeks later, the president's red line is looking a little shaky and maybe even in danger of being erased. Biden has done little to counter about 20 Iranian proxy attacks on American military bases in Syria and Iraq, which left a score of our service members with brain injuries. Equally troubling, White House support for Israel's response in Gaza is starting to show cracks. And this is why I bring it up, because we have mentioned it on the program. But the shakiness is concerning. There are daily lectures from the administration about the need for Israel to protect Arab civilians. And aides let it be known that Biden warned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about concerns in a phone call. This shift in tone suggests the president, already unpopular as he runs for re-election, and now under fire from anti-Israel forces in his own party, and also, I would add, and Michael Goodwin says it, the media outlets. So they could be, the Biden administration, looking for a political off-ramp. Depending on the level of his desperation and his poll numbers, he could be close to demanding a ceasefire, to which I would make a familiar one-word appeal: don't. This, of course, from Michael Goodwin at the Post, if you're just joining us. A surrender to critics and protesters, many of whom are unabashed anti-Semites, would be a historic abandonment of the lone Jewish nation, and potentially set in motion 3 dangerous consequences. First, it would undercut Israel's right to eradicate a savage terrorist enemy that vows to wipe it off the map, and could encourage the mad mullahs to unleash their proxies in Lebanon and elsewhere. Second, a Biden retreat would send a signal of American weakness, not only to Iran, but also to Russia and China. And this is why I bring up this piece. It's a great piece from beginning to end. But it would understandably rattle such vulnerable allies as Ukraine and Taiwan. And I mentioned Taiwan because we talked about in the past the real threat of China. It would send this weakness, much like the Afghanistan withdrawal signaled that weakness. This would be at a whole nother level at a time when we've continued to show weakness. It would be just continuing to increase. Third, our friends in Europe, Asia, and the Mideast would detect the smell of fear and recalibrate their own best interests in a world where America has buckled and forfeited its role of global leadership. And that's it. China would take advantage of that opportunity, if you will, for our friends in Europe, Asia, and the Mideast as they see our as it says here, our fear if he were to do this. And they would start to think, who best serves our interest? Who should we go with that may help us more? Because it's always about looking out for number one. In short, a Biden flip-flop on Israel could unleash a geopolitical realignment. And that's what we talked about in this program with China, looking for that opportunity, looking for that hole where they can go in and say, we are the world's superpower now, along with Russia. And it could bring the planet closer to World War III. Michael Goodwin finishes up, well, there's a lot more to the piece, but in this section, although I'm distressed by the evidence of a president going wobbly in the crunch, I'm not surprised. Biden is fundamentally a weak leader whose track record is abysmal and whose health, mental and physical, is in obvious decline. In truth, and this is the sad note, in truth, the real surprise was his initial rock-ribbed support for Israel. And then he says, Michael Goodwin, and there's a lot more here, and I would highly recommend you find it for yourself in the New York Post. Thankfully, Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul are actively denouncing the development, but Biden is way behind the curve. Count that as another sign he is shrinking from the fight just when a steadfast president is needed most. I thought that was a really good piece coming out of New York Post and Michael Goodwin, kind of wrapping up a lot of what we've been saying on this program, and also, I think, highlighting the threat, the real threat of China. So let's take another short break. How am I doing? Yes, I do have to take another short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Just wrapping up the conversation we've been having. We do not have time for this piece, but another article at the New York Post from Victor Davis Hansen, saying destruction of Hamas is the only path to peace in the Jewish state. So let's stop with the appeasement talk. He said Biden and his team give us endless variations on the same loud threat to Iran along the following lines. If outside actors are considering widening the war, don't. They accompany this by reacting only 4 times to 83 documented acts of Iranian aggression directed at U.S. forces, by greenlighting a $6 billion ransom to Iran, and by lifting sanctions, resulting in a $50 billion Iranian oil windfall. As a general rule, the more one side appeases the other, or is humiliated, or is shown to be weak or naive, the more likely it is that the tentative party will vainly seek to restore lost deterrence by ever tougher language, even though it must know that these ever-increasing verbal threats are becoming increasingly empty. So really piggybacking off of Michael Goodwin's piece here. All right, when we, no, I have a second. We have a couple other things. We're going to change up the topics here. As it's unbelievable how fast this show goes. But the Times Union has an article about Governor Hochul, saying that Hochul continues to push against anti-Semitism as tensions mount. Giving a speech, a 10-minute speech, after the arrest of that student at Cornell, she said, "This cruelty by New Yorkers against New Yorkers must stop. I'm also making sure that our law enforcement is focused and has the resources to identify and stop criminal behavior and hate crimes. Violators will be identified and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." So a lot of people saying that Governor Hochul has been very strong on this, when we've seen weakness and even worse from other politicians. So I wanted to mention that to you before we moved on. All right, we got to take a short break. When we come back, a couple of things here about presidential politics, and then it's hard to believe, but we'll already be done with the program. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. So Nikki Haley, I like the language that they use. Nikki Haley surges into second place in South Carolina, obviously in the primary polling. The former United Nations ambassador jumped to 22% support in the CNN poll released Tuesday, doubling up on DeSantis, who is at 11%. Now, we knew there would be some changes with Mike Pence getting out. I mean, Mike Pence never really had, I don't think he had double digits, even close. Haley says she is on the cusp of being the main alternative to Trump in the race for the nomination, leapfrogging DeSantis. And we know that DeSantis has been sliding in the polls. Now, he countered this idea that she is the main alternative and criticized Haley for funding political action committee ads that were aimed at him, saying, quote, "You don't do that unless you view me as a threat," DeSantis says. But weirdly, or not weirdly, but Neil Cavuto asked Ron DeSantis, "Hey, would you step out of this race since Haley is surging? If you don't emerge as one of those 2 or 3, would you step out of the race?" DeSantis responding, "I'm definitely going to be in the top, so we're ready for that. We're going the distance. People can make whatever decisions they want. I respect the vice president's decision," meaning Pence, to drop out. "I think he's a good man. I think he served the conservative cause very well over a number of years. You know, I'm in it all the way, so you're going to be seeing a lot of me." Cavuto says, even if you sink in the polls or others, particularly Nikki Haley, emerge stronger, DeSantis says, it's not about the polls. We're going to win Iowa. So there you are. A quick update on that. Do we have anything? How am I doing on time? We're doing good. Oh, I forgot to mention this earlier. I know I'm jumping around as I always do here at the end. There are many politicians now calling to cut millions of dollars in state funding to Columbia University and Cornell over this anti-Semitism. I'm sorry, I meant to mention this earlier. I got out of order here. 2 Ivy League schools, wait do you hear these numbers, struggling to deal with anti-Semitism are getting at least $200 million from New York taxpayers, meaning you and I. Now, some are demanding that the gravy train end if these universities don't do a better job addressing this anti-Semitism. Some of the public cash that flows into Columbia and Cornell universities comes as direct aid. Cornell pulls about $127 million from you and I. Wow. And you know these universities, these elite universities, have all these bank accounts, essentially, full of money. This was a major issue about a year or 2 ago in talks about cutting funding because they had so much in reserve, so much in the bank. But we are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you again to Michael Volino, Thurston's town supervisor, who is running for re-election. Thank him for giving us an update on the sludge issue there and also talking about the campaign. We do really appreciate it. On tomorrow's show, we're going to be talking with former congressman and current chairman of the Steuben County GOP, Joe Sempolinski. He'll be joining us tomorrow morning. And, well, stay tuned all week and all the way up until Election Day and every day after that because we have a lot of special guests coming up. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I hope everyone had a wonderful Halloween yesterday. And thank you to everybody who came up here on Market Street and said hi. We will be back tomorrow morning starting at 7. I look forward to it already. Have a great day, everyone.